Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the 5 p.m. podcast. I'm Dan, your resident political enthusiast.
And I'm Tina, always here to dig into the stories that matter. Dan, what's got you fired up today?
Oh man, Tina, you are not going to believe this. So picture this. You're in Ontario, Canada, right? You go to grab your favorite American beer, or maybe a nice bottle of Napa Valley wine.
Sounds like a good start to the evening.
Well, here's the thing about that. They're gone. Vanished. As of February 5th, 2025, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, or LCBO as it's known, has pulled every single American alcohol product from their shelves.
Wait, seriously? No more American alcohol in Ontario? What on earth happened?
It's all because of these new tariffs the U.S. imposed on Canadian goods. It's like a trade war, but with booze as a casualty. Canada's retaliating, big time.
Okay, let's back up for a second. So the U.S. slaps tariffs on Canadian goods, and Canada's response is to ban American alcohol? It seems, well, kind of drastic, don't you think?
That's what I thought. But here's the kicker. It's not just Ontario. Quebec is doing it too. They asked their liquor board, the SAQ, to remove all U.S. products. And our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau? He's announced 25% tariffs on over $100 billion in U.S. goods.
Whoa. So this is way bigger than just a few bottles of bourbon disappearing from shelves. This is a full-blown trade dispute. How did it escalate to this point?
So basically what's happening is, these tariffs are like taxes on imported goods, right? They're meant to protect a country's own industries, or to use as leverage in trade talks. In this case, the U.S. put tariffs on Canadian goods, and Canada's hitting back.
Right, retaliatory tariffs. It's like saying, oh yeah, you want to play that game? We can play it too. But why target alcohol specifically?
I was just reading about this, and it seems like a pretty strategic move. See, the LCBO is government-run. It's a crown corporation, which means it's owned by the Ontario government. So, when they decide to stop selling U.S. alcohol, it's a direct hit to American producers.
I get it. It's not just about the money, although, from what I saw, U.S. alcohol exports to Canada were over $2 billion last year. It's more of a statement, isn't it?
Exactly. And think about it this way. It's a very visible statement. Everyone notices when their favorite drink is suddenly unavailable. Dr. Emily Thompson, a trade expert at the University of Toronto, pointed out that this move is designed to get people talking and put pressure on both governments.
That makes sense. It's like hitting where it hurts, in a way that people can relate to. So how are American alcohol producers reacting to this?
Well, not great, as you can imagine. Imagine you're a small winery in Napa Valley, and suddenly you can't sell your product in a huge market like Ontario. Some of these wineries are reporting up to a 30% loss in revenue.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt. I guess they'll need to find new markets, maybe focus more on selling within the U.S. or look to other countries?
Right? Some are already looking into expanding into Asia or Europe. It's kind of like when a band loses a major record deal. They have to get creative, find new venues, maybe even change their sound a bit.
That's a great analogy. But what about the Canadian side of things? How are everyday Canadians reacting to all of this?
From what I gather, it's a mixed bag. A survey by the Ontario Consumers Association found that almost half of Ontarians regularly bought U.S. alcohol. Now, their choices are limited. They might have to pay more for other imports or switch to Canadian brands.
So it's not just an inconvenience, it might actually hit their wallets too. I can see people being frustrated about that, but I'm curious, are any Canadian businesses benefiting from this?
Oh yeah, definitely. Canadian craft breweries, for example, are seeing a boost. With less competition from American craft beers, they're selling more and even expanding their production. It's a silver lining for them, I guess.
That's interesting. It's like one door closes, another one opens. But what about the bigger picture here, Dan? What does this whole situation mean for the relationship between the U.S. and Canada?
This is where it gets even more complex. This isn't just about alcohol anymore. It's a symptom of a much larger issue, the trade relationship between the two countries. Remember the steel and aluminum tariffs back in 2018? This feels similar, but maybe even more intense.
So we're talking about potential long-term consequences here. It's not just a temporary spat. This could reshape how the U.S. and Canada interact economically for years to come.
Right. And Robert Chen from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce mentioned something interesting. He said that Canadian businesses are already looking for alternatives to U.S. suppliers, not just for alcohol, but for other products too.
So even if these tariffs are eventually lifted, the damage might already be done. Some of these new trade relationships that Canadian businesses are forming, CHEPs, they might stick around.
It's like a forced reshuffling of the deck. And it's not just about business, you know? There's an ethical angle to this too. We're talking about governments using consumer goods as pawns in a trade war.
You're right. I mean, on one hand, it's a strategic move. But on the other hand, it's directly impacting what people can and can't buy. That's a slippery slope. I wonder, could this whole situation push Canada to strengthen its trade ties with other countries, like the EU, for instance?
That's a real possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more Canadian deals with European or maybe even Asian countries. It would be a way for Canada to diversify its trade and not be so reliant on the U.S.
This whole thing is just so multifaceted. It is a lot to think about. We've got economic impacts, political strategy, consumer behavior, and even ethical considerations all wrapped up in this one issue.
And it's still unfolding. Who knows how this will all play out? But one thing's for sure, it's going to be interesting to watch. It might even lead to some major changes in how trade works, not just between the U.S. and Canada, but globally.
I agree. Well, this has been a great discussion. I think this gives our listeners a lot to chew on. It's a reminder that these big, seemingly abstract trade disputes actually have real-world consequences that affect ordinary people.
For sure. And it shows how interconnected everything is. A decision made in Washington or Ottawa can impact what's on the shelves in your local store, what you're drinking on a Friday night, and even the livelihoods of businesses on both sides of the border.
Well said, Dan. Thanks for breaking it all down for us today. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to the 5 p.m. podcast. We'll see you next time.
Catch you later, everyone.